Hello, and welcome to Aging Matters, a program featuring individuals who talk about aging-related issues of interest to older adults and their families. I'm Cheryl Beversdorf, your host. We all have stories. They often reveal how we have dealt with life and the feelings we have experienced. They capture life's memorable moments and the lessons life has taught us. Every month, Aging Matters TV show features guests who share the way in which their experiences made a difference to them and to their community. I hope these stories of life are enlightening and maybe even inspire you to think in new ways about your own life experiences. Today, my guest is Len Kalkwarf, author of a book called Exploring the Libraries of the United States Presidents. In this year, when the focus is on electing the next president of the United States, Len will talk about places that honor and showcase the lives of our former presidents. He will give us an overview of the 13 official presidential libraries, as well as historic sites associated with presidents before the libraries were established. Len will also talk about his experience as a volunteer at the White House during the Obama administration. So welcome, Len, and thank you for joining me today.
Happy to be on.
So let's start by asking you, when and why did you decide to study presidential history? And did your understanding of each president changed as you learned more, and if so, how?
Well, I've always been interested in history. And back in about, I think it was early 2000, I read an article in the local newspaper saying that there was a presidential library that had just been finished in Springfield, Illinois, and it was Abraham Lincoln. And my wife and I were going to make a trip to Iowa to visit my relatives, and we decided we'd swing by Springfield and take a look at that particular library. And it was a very interesting experience. And I then discovered that, and I did not know this before, I discovered that there were actually official presidential libraries and that the Lincoln Library was not part of it. And then as we made our way to Iowa, we decided to stop at what was one of the official libraries, namely that of Herbert Hoover. And Herbert Hoover's library is located right near Iowa City, the home of the University of Iowa. And that kind of interested me and really whet my appetite that I wanted to see the different presidential libraries, because I found Hoover's library very interesting and very informative. So that was kind of the beginning of what we were doing.
So what made you and your wife decide to visit presidential libraries, and over what period of time did you visit these sites?
After we left my parents' home, we immediately went to Missouri to visit Truman's library, and then we went on to see Eisenhower's in Kansas as well. So yes, that was kind of the beginning. And then I was determined that I was going to see all 13 of them, which we then did as over a period of about 5 6 years. Yeah.
Oh, so in 13 years you covered all 13 libraries?
Yes.
And explain what federal agency manages the presidential libraries, and how many presidents actually have official libraries?
It's the administration of the Archives and Records Administration. And of course, the archives are located in DC, but they also have a large place in College Park, Maryland. In fact, that may be the primary headquarters, I'm not sure, but they're the ones that control the presidential libraries.
Okay, and so you said Hoover, now was President Hoover, was that the first of the libraries? How many official libraries are there now?
Yeah, well, it starts with Herbert Hoover. This is the oldest one historically.
Okay.
And then the last one that is finished is that of George W. Bush. And of course, Obama's is the next one to come. That'll be one of the official libraries as well. And what is interesting for me, and was very, very interesting, I was born in 1928 when Hoover was elected president. So everything that happened during my lifetime is recorded in one of the presidential libraries. So it was a good review of my lifetime experience.
They ought to have a little corner for each of the libraries to feature you, since you've been there for all of them.
I doubt that, but go ahead.
And one of the things that I'm wondering about is, how are presidential libraries and museums related? And are these two organizations usually located in the same geographical area?
Okay, first of all, a presidential library is not like a public library where you would go in to check out books and material. Basically, a presidential library is the place where the official papers of the president are stored. Now, there was a time when presidents thought and felt and they believed that their papers that belonged to them, and they could do with their papers what they wanted. But that has changed now. And I think there's a Presidential Library Act of 1978, which declares that every paper that the president sees and touches is part of the public, belongs to the public. Now, prior to that, somebody like Calvin Coolidge, for example, he destroyed a lot of his papers. Some of the other papers of some of the other presidents have been lost, or they belong to private collectors now and so on. But that is no longer permissible. And so a presidential library has all of the official papers of the president. And if one wants to write a book or do research on a particular project, this is where one would go to find out the original sources of that particular president on a particular issue. In addition to that, there is what we call the other component, and that's the museum. And it's probably the museum that most of us are interested in. I'm not really interested in going to the library to do the research because I'm not going to be writing any books or doing in-depth study. But I am interested in seeing what the president did and seeing all the displays that the committee has put out about that particular president. So there's really two components, the library itself and the museum.
And have you discovered, Len, that these two components, the library and the museum, are always located in the same geographical area?
Well, they always are, except for one, and that's Gerald Ford. He has his library in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he went to law school, and then his museum is in Grand Rapids. And this is the area where he served as that's his congressional district, in other words. So, but he's the only one that has a separation. Everybody else, the library and the museum, is located in the same building.
So do you think that presidential libraries accurately describe the lives and historic events that occurred during the time the president was in office?
With a little exception, the committee that's responsible for doing the displays in the museum are supposed to do be very accurate. And of course, they put their best foot forward because they're the ones who like that particular president. Because after all, they're working on that particular president's library. For the most part, I would say yes. It's a very thorough, although some things are missing. For example, Nixon's library did not gain presidential status as a presidential library for quite some time because there was no display about Watergate. And it wasn't until Watergate was added that they became part of the presidential library. I noticed, for example, Clinton's library talks about his impeachment, talks about the girl involved with him, Monica Lewinsky. And there is I would say, a good display of that. The infamous blue dress, by the way, is not there. Another library that I'm thinking in terms of not completely accurate is Reagan's, because nothing is really mentioned about the IRA-Contra controversy. So that is, I think, completely left out. But otherwise, yes, they do put their best foot forward, obviously, but it is quite accurate, I think.
So at least at this point, you're talking about the museum. I'm curious, are there other features about the president that are located on the grounds of the library, like maybe a boyhood home or
Oh, yes.
a site? What would you tell us?
Yes, a number of them have the graves of the president and his wife are located right on the grounds. Herbert Hoover, his dad's blacksmith shop is located on the grounds. Herbert Hoover was a Quaker, and the Quaker Meeting House is located on the grounds. By the way, there was only two presidents that were Quakers. Hoover was one, Nixon was the other. The other one, it's interesting, is Reagan's library includes Air Force One, which means that it's a very large building to be able to house not only the other things, but also the Air Force One, as well as a Marine helicopter and Secret Service cars as well. So yeah, those things are located there. I'm thinking in terms of Eisenhower. His boyhood home is located right on the property. A number of others have, various things other than just the library itself.
If I remember correctly, also, Len, wasn't the airplane, maybe again, it would be Air Force One, that President Nixon got on when he decided to resign, and that famous picture where he turns around before he gets in, gives the sign,
victory sign.
Yeah, victory sign,
Yeah,
and it's on the plane.
I don't remember that, but what I do remember about Nixon's library is the picture of Nixon and Elvis Presley. As a matter of fact, the archives has indicated that the thing that they requested the most is a picture of Nixon and Elvis.
Well, quite frankly, for those of us who remember Elvis, that's,
Yes.
and that was certainly a historic moment. And
That's true. That's true.
so, of course, we're, for each of these presidential libraries, as I understand it, it is usually located where they grew up or they were involved politically. Are there special sites that are associated with the president that are maybe a little ways away from the actual presidential museum and library?
Yes, LBJ, for example, his ranch is located, I'm not sure anymore, but I think maybe some 20 miles away, but well worth visiting because LBJ used to fly on Air Force One to Austin, Texas. And then he'd get on another plane, a smaller plane, that would take him to his ranch. And he had a runway right down the center of his ranch. And when you visit the ranch, it's very obvious. In fact, my wife and I drove around the entire ranch and then ended up his house, which is located there on the ranch. And it is on his ranch that his grave for both him and his wife are located there, as well as the schoolhouse that he attended as a boy. And there is one incident where LBJ signed a educational legislation, and he signed it in front of the schoolhouse along with his, I think it was his kindergarten teacher who was sitting next to him.
And if I remember also, Len, isn't President Truman's home is not too far from?
That is correct. That's probably maybe only about a mile or two away from the presidential library. And there is that entire district there that kind of is devoted to Truman. It's where he used to walk. The drugstore where he worked as a boy is located there. His house is there. And my wife and I went through the house. At the time, we were not allowed to go to the second floor because the daughter, Margaret, was still alive. And apparently she still had her clothes there. But since then, she has died, and I understand now that you can view the entire house. But the interesting thing about the house there was you'd walk in, and it looked like Harry Truman had just left to go for a walk. Some of his things were just hanging there right in the kitchen, and things were right on the kitchen table. So,
and probably it looked like he was going to come back any moment, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, very interesting.
So now as you said, you've done all 13 libraries.
Right.
What did you enjoy most about the libraries and the museums? Which were especially memorable? You've talked about a lot of them, but what were your favorite ones?
Yeah, there are a number of them that I would say are very interesting. I would say Harry Truman, for example, was extremely interesting to me because Truman was a very humble person. He was not one who was standing in the front at all the events and so on that were taking place. He gave credit to other people. But there were so many historical things that took place during his lifetime. For example, Truman apparently did not know about the Manhattan Project when he became president. And yet he was the one who had to make the decision about dropping the atomic bomb on Japan. The Berlin airlift took place. The Marshall Plan, and he gave credit to Marshall, for example. So there were a lot of displays there that I thought was extremely interesting. I was also impressed with LBJ. I wasn't too impressed with the building. I think it's sometimes referred to as a pyramid, and I think it's like 9 stories tall. But you go inside, and there are so many things that he has there. And people who were involved in the culture of that day, the musicians, artists, and so on, they're all listed there in his particular library. And I thought that was interesting. Plus the fact that he also signed some extremely important legislation when it came to voter rights. And all of that is on display in his library.
I was also thinking of some of the other presidents, for example, who had very short terms. You mentioned a little bit earlier about Gerald Ford. Obviously, right. Gerald Ford was never elected. He was appointed. And
that's right.
When he ran for the election, that was when President Carter won the election. So did you find that, or another one that I'm thinking again, the term was cut short, tragically, was the assassination of President Kennedy. Did you find that even though the terms maybe were shorter, that they still had so many facts and oh
yeah, and that was, yes, that was true, especially of Kennedy. Ford didn't have that much, was my impression. But the man who only served one term and who made a great impression upon me was George H.W. Bush. As I recall his presidency, I wasn't overly impressed. But when I visited his library, I had a complete change of heart. I was extremely impressed with what he did and what he was, and the kind of man that he was. So I found that a very impressive library to visit.
So, as you said, the last library now that one can visit is that of George W. Bush. Do you have any sense of what the status is of the presidential library for President Barack Obama?
Yes, it was supposed to open in 2021, which would be next year. However, and I'm not sure exactly the reason for it, but it has not yet, they have not yet broken ground. Apparently they have some difficulty in terms of the site And what it is, I don't know. It's still going to be located in Chicago, but when it will start being built and when it will be finished, I guess it's anybody's guess at this particular point. So we're going to have to wait.
Sounds like it.
However, I do want to visit it.
And I am sure that you will have that chance to do that. I hope we all will. So
Yes, I do too. Yes.
So Len, given how interesting all of these historic sites are, why did you decide to write a book? There's lots of other people that have perhaps, hopefully, have visited, all of the presidential libraries. But what made you decide to write a book?
Well, frankly, I had no intention of writing a book about it. But I've been doing a program here in the retirement community where I live on different presidents. And as a result of it, people have asked me about different presidents, and I mentioned about having visited the libraries, and they want to know more about it. And I thought, well, there must be an interest in a wider audience that would be interested in reading about it. So I decided to write a book. And then once I decided to write the book, I decided, well, I'm not sure I can do that because I never took any notes because I had no intention of writing it. And then it dawned upon me that I had the best possible notes possible because I took a myriad of pictures of every library. And so all I had to do is go back, look at my pictures, and it just brought back so many memories, and I had no difficulty at all of writing a book at that point. So.
And I've had the privilege of reading your book, and I was curious as to what to highlight because, again, having visited many of these libraries myself, I thought you did an excellent job of determining what should be highlighted. Was it basically, because of the pictures or just good memories of your visits?
Basically memories, and also as I think back of my experience of living through all that time, things that stuck out on me at the time when I was going through it historically. So that's why I chose what I did.
The other thing I wanted to ask, because I did notice that you had written about the fact that you did this, that you visited the historic site associated with every other president.
That's right. That's correct.
Just give us some examples of some of the places that you visited.
McKinley's place in Ohio. McKinley, of course, was assassinated, and there's a great monument to him, and I would say what we would call a major museum. And then also in Ohio, Rutherford Hayes. Rutherford Hayes's house is a beautiful house. We took a tour of that. And next to his house is another building, and that building is his library. And again, it's well worth visiting that particular place. And then the other one that I found very interesting, we went to all of the sites, as you mentioned, but John Tyler. Tyler became the first accidental president. He was vice president for Harrison. And when Harrison died almost immediately after he became inaugurated, Tyler's home is located on the James River. And it is probably the largest single family dwelling, maybe in the country. The house is, on one side of the house, he built his law office. And then he married a younger woman after his first wife died, and she was very interested in the Virginia reel. So he added the other direction of his house. So it's now a very, very large house. And the interesting thing about it is that it is still occupied by one of the members of the family, but you can take a self-guided tour of the property. And I've done that at least twice and found that very, very interesting. So that's another place that one can go to, especially living here in Virginia.
Well, it sounds like that, if people are interested, they just need to look up each president, see where they lived, and they can find some site that's associated with it.
Right. Yeah, you can go out to Indiana and visit the Tippecanoe battleground of Harrison. That's another spot to go to.
I wanted to ask you one more question because you did, and I mentioned this in my introduction, Len, that you were a volunteer in the White House. So tell us briefly when you worked there and what you did there.
I was a volunteer for about 6 years. It was during the Obama administration, and I was in the communications department. And one of the first things I did was to read the letters that were being sent to Obama and put a lot of the information, the data, sorting the data, by the way, into different categories, and then later some of the data into computers. And then later on, we would answer the letters for Obama and send out the answer to their particular requests. Very interesting experience to see what people were interested in and what they were trying to tell Obama as the president. Some good, some not so good.
We're just about out of time, Len. Just, in our closing minutes here, why would you tell older adults, or anyone for that matter, why should they be interested in presidential history and visit the sites of all of these U.S. presidents, the libraries as well as the other sites?
Well, I think we need to know about our history. And I think our history can tell us a lot of things. And we ought to be informed of what the different presidents, the decisions they made to keep us well informed and helping us in terms of how we're going to be voting, for example, in the future. We can learn from what other presidents have done. Some of the things they did, we certainly do not want to repeat. And it's helpful to us.
Okay.
I would encourage it.
I want to thank Len Kalkwarf, author of Exploring the Libraries of the U.S. Presidents, for joining me today. This program is broadcast Sundays at 5:30 p.m. and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. on Comcast Channel 69 or Verizon Channel 38 in Arlington, Virginia, or streaming live at those times on arlingtonmedia.org. Aging Matters is also on the radio. The program is broadcast every Tuesday at 2 p.m. on WERA-LP Arlington 96.7 FM. And you can listen to all Aging Matters radio programs by visiting either mixcloud.com/Aging Matters or tiny.cc/Aging Matters archive. And finally, both radio and television Aging Matters programs are posted on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Aging Matters WERA. Thank you for watching the program today, and please join me again for the next Aging Matters show. Until then, remember, age is just a number, not a label.